You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your sometimes host. I guess I'm kind of hosting today. This is Dmitri Vietze. I'm the CEO and founder of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the PR firm that specializes in music innovation, music technology. And this is what would you say, Music Tectonics Conference bestie episode?
Besties!
It's one of our news roundups. It's been a long time since we've done one.
Was the last one maybe our live 200th episode? I think it might have been.
I think it was, yeah.
Oh my gosh, what number do we think we're on now?
Oh, it's like 225 or something.
Wow, they keep
Yeah,
growing.
They do.
Well, it's interesting. We are going to do a news roundup. I think we got about 5-ish articles from, our own horizon scanning, something we do at Rock, Paper, Scissors, keep an eye on news in the industry. Sometimes it's about the size of the industry, revenue generating sources, growth, shrinking, also trends, big picture things. Some of them are related to music, some are related to technology, some to society, and then also specific news items that just should affect the overall industry. And I wanted to kick it off with one I think relevant to podcast listening. But before I do that, who are these other voices here? We've got with us on the show Eleanor Rust, our
Hello.
Director of Marketing at Rock, Paper, Scissors and Music Tectonics, the conference, the podcast. You wouldn't be listening to this if it wasn't for Eleanor, honestly. She makes sure. We've got our editor, Grace Elmer, who's not on today, but Eleanor makes sure everything's happening. And Shayli Ankenbruck,
Hello.
who's our conference planner for Music Tectonics, although really we rope her into all sorts of events. If you've ever been on an online event with Music Tectonics over the last year or so, Shayli was part of that, making sure that happened too.
Heck yeah.
Great to have you guys on the show.
Great to be here.
And, there may be people out there that are listening intently and all they're doing is listening to this podcast, but I have a feeling that a lot of any podcast listeners are doing something else. They're washing dishes, they're walking the dog, they're taking a jog. They're hopefully they're not like trying to do something that's like flying a plane.
Too distracting.
But MIDiA Research, who we're super fans of, the research and consulting firm, has a new article out called Welcome to the Era of Attention Inflation. And I might just kick off by reading this because they define what they mean by attention inflation. The COVID pandemic and associated lockdown dynamic allowed entertainment consumption to reach new heights amongst a temporary surplus of free time, right? Everyone all of a sudden was doing all this stuff. However, after restrictions eased, consumers found the constraints on their newfound time tighten and had to make sacrifices, often preferring to return to real-life activities at the expense of digital entertainment. Oh no! The intuitive expectation was that consumers would lose some of their newly found engagement time, but this is happening only partially. Consumers got so accustomed to the higher levels of consumption that rather than giving it back when prompted, their response was to accommodate this additional engagement through increased multitasking and therefore diluted focus or attention. As a result, background and social consumption together made up more than half of all entertainment hours in Q1 of 2022. So they've got this new report. They're defining this inflation, this attention inflation, because people are doing more background stuff. They're doing other stuff at the same time. They go on to say, as each unit of user attention becomes divided among an increasing number of activities, the value of that attention is diminished. This is the concept of attention inflation, where time spent on entertainment is growing while simultaneously becoming valuable. And the other thing that I thought this was interesting, because we've had Mark Mulligan from MIDiA speak on the podcast at the conference and so forth, he talked about attention recession, about how everything, was that at the first
It
conference?
was, yeah. It was the very first conference.
Yeah, so he
2019.
kind of put that out there, and it was sort of this idea that people are adding more and more stuff to consume, to do, but at some point, you only have 24 hours in a day, right?
That was the time when Netflix was saying that their biggest competitor was sleep.
Right, and they were winning.
Yeah.
But now, there's still this competition. So it also says, this dynamic is the next evolution of a trend that previously culminated in the attention recession, a period in which different forms of entertainment were increasingly forced to compete amongst themselves for the same finite attention, And what was interesting about this to me was they said the big winners in this situation, the current situation of this attention inflation, are things that you can do that don't require a behavioral change. And they said the big winners, music streaming and social media, saw huge rises in consumption over the past 18 months, while video formats generally saw a decline due to their higher attention demands. Multitasking with music and audio is naturally easier than with video and games. However, it should be noted that this does not mean that focus-heavy formats such as games are going away. Rather, they can adapt by including multitasking-friendly content alongside the usual focus-heavy propositions.
So backgroundable media is winning in this inflation economy.
And it's interesting. I've noticed myself, I'm embarrassed to say, as a longtime music industry person, listening to music that is specifically for while I'm doing other stuff, which is not how I used to listen to music.
Right.
And some of it, I think, is related to the post-pandemic era, the modern era of wars and Supreme Court decisions turning over important women's rights issues, and where, I kind of just want something to like even me out while I'm doing other stuff.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Is that all of these media is not interchangeable, and there are other factors besides just the hours in the day and what you've been used to consuming. There's peaks and valleys in your attention being required as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm like constantly consuming more than one form of media, like nonstop with music, with social media. Like you can scroll and watch TV and have music on in the house at the same
You're
time.
two-screening.
Yeah, definitely.
So one thing that this reminded me of, so I don't believe this article drew direct connections to, say, advertising revenue, but we've seen these sort of inflation recession cycles in things like, advertising for blogs and then for YouTube, where there's a boom and then a bubble collapsing that leads to this, over this competition over advertising dollars that sees everything kind of shrink. I'm really curious if we're going to see that happen, or if this leaning into backgroundable media is going to maybe lead to more growth.
So, but in a sense, it's also, it varies by format, right? So if a format was a heavy attention, like do one task at a time format, that became sort of where people were gravitating towards on this macroeconomic societal level, then that platform could be successful at getting attention and selling that attention through ads. But if it's only audio, and if it's only audio that doesn't have ads and is not as interruptible in that sense, it leads to forces that platform can't really change, right?
Right. We've been seeing a lot of news about big money advertising in podcasts, and a lot of data that suggests that podcast advertising, especially host-read ads, are really powerful. But I wonder if we're going to see that change, because ads are not as backgroundable as.
Although the host-read ads are better because it feels more consistent, maybe for listeners.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Right. Music Tectonics Conference coming October 25th through 27th.
Get your badge at musictectonics.com.
Just one little piece from this article, which, by the way, is, though they have one of their big reports, this particular article is written by Perry Gresham. Shout out to Perry. We predict that attention will peak again this winter, but with a huge background component. The trend towards increased multitasking is a creative hack by the consumers, but this dynamic cannot last forever. If consumers continue to dilute their time forever, they will ultimately end up with no engagement at all. Therefore, there must be an upper limit to multitasking, which is kind of interesting to think about as well.
And if engagement in the media decreases, then I'm expecting that, things like advertising dollars will also decrease.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me wonder if any of the video services that you can only play in background when you pay the premium will reconsider whether there's a free version that you can play in background.
Interesting.
Like when you have YouTube on your phone, if you don't have the premium account,
You have to keep
stops.
it open.
You have to
Yeah.
keep it
That's
open.
one of
Yeah.
their gate.
It's like a hack.
gateways.
They're gatekeeping. Yeah.
But if they can't sell those ads, or if those ads aren't working and then they can't sell those ads as a result, then maybe, who knows? I don't know. Not to pick on YouTube or anything, but cool. So that's kind of a nice big picture trend. Now, Shayli, you also came across something recently. The McKinsey Technology Trends Outlook 2022 came out in late August. Tell us what interested you there.
Yeah, so this article was definitely more big picture trends on the technology industry as a whole, but I picked out 5 trends that I thought were really unique to the space that we're constantly working in. this wasn't the first one, but it was kind of the one I wanted to start on because obviously everyone is talking about Web3 nonstop right now. So Web3 had $110 billion of investment in 2021. But what I also found interesting was this article gave an adoption score on a scale of 0 to 5. And Web3 had an adoption score of 1, which I found to be really interesting. Another one that was close to the top was AI technology. This had $165 billion in investment in 2021. And this had high adoption at 4 on that scale of 0 to 5. So
I wonder if what they're measuring with the adoption, whether it's because obviously it's not the adoption of investment.
Consumer,
yeah,
or,
it must be, or maybe it's some sort of like trust rating or something, like whether the public thinks it's going to come into play or something like that. Because I mean, the dollars are similar in terms of investment, but people are still wondering what Web3 is going to do in their lives or do for them.
And another way those two differed was another metric they used was I think they might have called it innovation, but it had to do with research being put towards these features. So Web3 scored really low on that sort of scientific research front, whereas AI technology scored really high, which I think matches what we see. Where while there are definitely lots of business applications for AI, we see a ton of academic research from universities going into developing AI and developing its uses. Whereas Web3 seems to be sort of, I mean, it is, we think of it as
crypto
kind of,
bros.
Yeah, we think of it as a gate crasher, that it's more business, less research, less scientific.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, I wonder if there's a correlation between the investment and the adoption rates, like a high investment, low adoption rate, that being early on the curve of innovation, or not necessarily that it'll find product market fit, but that if it does, that's the early moment. And then as you see adoption increase, it shows that there's traction and that the investment warranted it, and maybe it goes backwards when bubbles burst.
Interesting. Yeah, one great thing about this article was the visual representation. It showed many different metrics along a two-dimensional representation, and so you could really see things move over time and really compare different factors in different ways. So we're going to include a link in the show notes, because if you're a visual thinker like me, you'll definitely want to see exactly how they've laid out this complicated matrix in an easy to understand way.
Cool.
What were some of the other trends?
Yeah, so there's a couple more. Advanced connectivity with $166 billion in investment. Industrializing machine learning with $5 billion in investment in 2021. And then this one I also found really interesting is immersive reality technologies. And this one had $30 billion in investment, which I found to be a little bit low, considering just like going through the pandemic in 2021 and all the technology that emerged from the pandemic. I don't know. I thought that immersive reality technologies would have a higher investment on that.
Yeah, and I think if I remember right, I don't have the article right in front of me, but if I remember right, it grew more slowly than AI technology. But I guess when you think about it, AI technology covers an enormous range of sectors, whereas immersive reality technologies is one smaller sector. But the fact that they focused on it alongside really major shifts in computing power shows, I think, its power as a trend.
Some of those advanced tech connectivity and the AI and the industrialized machine learning stuff, to me, is almost like adoption of just technology in general. In a way, it's like the next phase of, so like advanced connectivity, for example, 5G, and they talk about even 6G, cellular. They talk about low power networks. They talk about Earth to orbit satellites for internet and connectivity and things like that. Those things, they're almost like infrastructure. They're just like modernizing infrastructure. So sure, maybe there's more you can do with immersive technology once you have 5G mobile devices, and in parts of the world where Ethernet a wired connection is never going to be a realistic thing. They get to leapfrog.
No dial-ups.
Yeah.
Straight from landlines to...
Straight from building a fire to having 5G. Nothing in
Right,
between. I
right.
mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what it means to me is that you can get larger growth of adoption of these higher tech things that require that level of connectivity. So we might see some interesting video live stream or immersive technology that is coming from very remote places.
Yeah, we might see people moving directly from in-person music making to a Pocket DAW rather than, kind of going through a traditional studio path.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what I think of when I hear about advanced connectivity and machine learning, just that those things are able to be leveraged for a wider and wider audience as they're adopted and as more investment goes towards them. So
Yeah.
for music, that means tons of creativity will be unlocked.
Right. Exactly. The same. Yeah. With the AI stuff. Exactly. Like what other music making is going to happen for people who never had access to certain tools or training or whatever. The phone just does it and they start being creative and so forth. So, of course, these billions of dollars that Shayli, you're talking about people investing were not in music. They were in the overall categories
And
for
yeah,
each of these.
technology as a
But
whole.
think about what it unlocks for our industry.
Exactly. You know what? We've got more to talk about, but we should probably take a quick break. We've got an announcement. We'll be right back.
Hey, Music Tectonics podcast listeners, it's Shayli here to give you some more Music Tectonics Conference updates. The next update I want to share with you all is what is going to be happening on the morning of October 27th. So we are going to be at Expert Dojo, which is this rooftop open air venue just a couple blocks from the beach. And we are going to hear a presentation on the future of music from MIDiA Research. We're going to hear from analysts Chris Thakrar and Tatiana Sirasano as they give a data-driven presentation around how music is becoming a background activity as media consumption transitions to platforms like TikTok and Twitch rather than traditional DSPs like Spotify. Don't miss this presentation and all the other great things happening at the Music Tectonics Conference this year in Santa Monica, California, October 25th through 27th. Get your Music Tectonics Conference badge at musictectonics.com.
All right, we are back with our news roundup. Me, Shayli, Eleanor, we're here. I thought I would just mention one. We don't have to go into too much detail. As you can see, we can talk about these things for eons here. But Music Business Worldwide did an article not too long ago that was called NFT Marketplace OpenSea's Trading Volume Nosedives. 99%. Is the bubble bursting? I'll just read a little bit from it. On August 28th, OpenSea processed $9.34 million in NFT transactions, well below its May 1st peak of $2.7 billion, according to data from decentralized applications tracker DappRadar. The number of OpenSea users also plummeted to just 22,140 on Sunday, September 5th, from nearly 60,000 in January. DappRadar data showed OpenSea refuted the DappRadar data, telling Fortune that it was an unfair comparison. A spokesperson said the data tracker compared OpenSea's record trading day with one of its lowest. The spokesperson added that the company is not worried about the drop in trading volume. OpenSea prefers to calculate ETH volume, which excludes the effects of the cryptocurrency's price fluctuations. A little bit of getting into the weeds here because OpenSea's arguing with Fortune's or DappRadar's analysis of this. But
I should mention that they did lay off 20% of their staff. So, forecasts of a crypto winter is something they're very much preparing for.
Yeah, and they're not denying that. In this article, it goes on to say that they recognize that and they think that there'll be a lot of innovation in the utility of NFTs during this winter. Basically, in other words, less speculative stuff and
less
more stuff
bubble,
about it.
more bang.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like that, Eleanor. So I think the CEO was quoted as, "This is where we are now in the contraction phase that is settling into a period of stasis. This has all been further compounded by the current macroeconomic and geopolitical turmoil." Another person from OpenSea says, "During this winter, I expect that we'll see an explosion in innovation and utility across NFTs. With the hard but important changes we made today, we're in a better position to capture what will soon become the largest market on the planet." So I don't know if there's a lot to say here. I mean, it's just, in a news roundup, it seems like when we look at what is the potential of NFTs for monetization in music, good to know about the macroeconomics.
Yeah. Well, and definitely good to connect with that McKinsey report where they're showing that relatively low adoption adoption rate, relatively high investment for low adoption and low research. And maybe it'll be interesting to see how different aspects of those metrics grow and whether they push continued investment and adoption in the future.
And I think, I've said this before, I may be wrong. I'm not very good at predictions or projections or reading a crystal ball, but I think something in the kernel of whatever is happening here with both NFTs and Web3 is definitely going to take over time. I think the most successful moment in time will be when we're all interacting with collectibles that do or don't have utility or whatever, but we're not calling them NFTs because
that's just taken for granted. That's just what's happening behind the scenes.
Exactly. You know, I'd rather think about like I got a new
digital collectible.
Well, even something functional too. Like maybe I got a new background for a game or for my Zoom. I always talk about that because I'm on Zooms more than games.
And once things are cross-platform, you can, you know.
Right. And that starts to lead into the idea of like membership or like fan clubs or something like that, where yes, you have proof of it through this technology, but it unlocks these other things like discounts or access or
spaces where clout really matters. You know, where that getting it first, getting it bigger, getting it better, having, you know, being more prominent really matters.
You know, the funny thing about that to me is that you don't actually need blockchain or NFTs specifically to have that concept. You know, like frequent flyer clubs have been around forever, and we have clients like All Access Anonymous that's building that out for the festival world, that has a whole ecosystem. Clients like Fave that have this fan engagement that they're creating like a you can become a verified fan, which is super cool. And then what happens once you're a verified fan or a verified super fan as well? You can have it in, you know, tracked by blockchain, or you can have it as this token, but that's not the only way. I mean, people did it with laminated membership cards.
Sure, but in all of those cases, there's a central authority in which that happens. It's not mutually agreed upon by all the participants. And I think that's what the, you know, decentralized way.
It also allows for fluidity of what the offers are and the engagement is, because all of
and
the digital
growth, right? You can build in your, you know, your Patreon or Kickstarter tiers into how that utility grows.
And all that's cool regardless of what you call it.
Oh yeah.
So also from Music Business Worldwide, Eleanor, you pulled out this one about the live concert scene. Live concert interest in the U.S. nearing pre-COVID levels, new study shows.
Yeah, and that headline is interesting, but the details inside the article I think are great. And most of this derives from Luminate's recent trend reports. If you want to hear more about Luminate's trend coverage, Trista did a great interview recently with Jamie Marconette of Luminate on some of the other trends that they're tracking.
Definitely check that one out.
Yeah. I should maybe say that Luminate's a sponsor of the conference, and that's one reason why we're really digging what their data is doing. Okay, but back to this live music report. So one of the major numbers came from a survey surveying U.S. consumers. 36% said that they planned on attending a conference in the following year versus 15% who said they attended one concert in the previous year. And all of so Luminate's report comes from these survey responses, but also things like Google searches, that more people are searching for concerts than in previous years. And it also really jives with a major report from Live Nation on their sales, attendance figures, revenue, all of that stuff. They say that 2022 is on track to be the biggest year in live music history. Now, a lot of this is probably pent-up demand, people who wanted to go to shows but couldn't for 2 years and are now getting as many shows in as they can. But there were some numbers that suggested that it may be more than that there may be more growth, that many of the core business metrics that Live Nation is tracking far exceed the pre-pandemic metrics. So I'm really curious to see if all of these upward trending lines are going to keep that trend, if we're going to see some plateaus or falling off.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to think about whether there's some data tricks, optical illusions happening, you know, like nobody bought tickets for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, well, over the next 2 years, I want to go to some concerts. You start buying tickets all at once for stuff that's right now and that's for later. And
I also, for other data tricks, I wonder about people who bought tickets in 2020 and those shows have been postponed, because some of the bands I follow are doing shows now for which people bought tickets in 2019.
Yeah.
So how is that playing into How's that playing into this measurement?
This is definitely also really interesting to me because I think in a past news roundup, we chatted about how the live music space is getting more expensive. Like, not only are tickets getting more expensive, but the cost for the artist to put on an event is becoming more expensive. So it's interesting that there's still a lot of growth. There's still revenue growth for companies like that.
People are yearning for those experiences.
Oh, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. I spent some time in Portland this summer and got to go to Pickathon, which is a festival that's like, it's this year at least, it was in the woods, basically. They have these little carved out sections of these wood. I'd say Valerie June was the highlight. Ever get a chance to see her perform? I've seen her before, but in this wood setting, she was like an angel.
Wow.
But, having that experience up close, meeting people there, like for the first time, the food, the drink, all that stuff. And then also out at Sauvie Island, there's a new festival. Sauvie Island's this little place where you go to pick berries or take walks or bike rides. And somebody took over one of the farms there to do a concert series. So I got to see shows like Gregory Alan Isakov out there behind a 500-year-old oak tree. Oh my God. I mean, of course you're going to pay something for that, you know? You could stream it in the background, or you could actually go there and buy the food and sit with friends and
way to bring it back around to the first thing we talked about. That is really interesting, actually, the thought of that while there's a big growth in backgroundable media, that maybe what people will want to drop their dollars on are these things that are unrepeatable, uncapturable, unbackgroundable.
I'm sure that my 13-year-old was pulling up TikTok occasionally at the festivals, but Yeah.
It also, I wonder if that's a response in some ways to pandemic restrictions. This is a slightly weird neuron firing, but I've been talking to some theater people who it seems like a big trend for them are these immersive small group experiences rather than the traditional series of shows that you pack in as many people to the auditorium as you can. So ferrying people out to the woods, 20, 50 people at a time instead of, 1,000 people in an auditorium.
I wish there were only 50 people there. Parking was like a shuttle ride away.
That's something that I feel like really came out of the pandemic is with live streaming events, you could really get intimate with an artist and you could they would be like, what song do you want to hear next? Or they would ask for a lot of that fan engagement because it was accessible, just in the chat bar on the side of your screen. And I felt that a lot. South by Southwest was kind of my first going back to any live events. And I really felt like a lack of quality on live artists after spending the last year and a half listening to really great live streamed artists.
Interesting. I wonder if that's where we're going to see some growth in event tech to sort of increase that exciting, intimate experience. I don't know. We keep hearing things about AR augmentation for live events, whether it's for the people watching them at home or for the people who are there at the event. I wonder if that's one way to sort of capture some, provide unique experiences for those at home and for those at the show.
They're two different experiences.
Yeah.
They're not. Obviously during the pandemic, live streaming kind of performances came to fill in where live performances couldn't be at the time. But now I think they should be looked at as totally separate entities and they're not really comparable.
Yeah.
I think they can definitely both learn stuff from one another, but.
Yeah. In fact, I think that Music Business Worldwide report ended in talking about some pretty, blockbuster live streaming events that definitely, even with this huge return to live, there's a lot going on in live streaming that's still innovating and still getting fans super excited.
And there's a lot going on in the news. In fact, we have one more article we want to make sure to hit. But before we do that, we're going to take one quick break.
Does your company belong at the center of the conversation about music, tech, and innovation? Listen, you should consider sponsoring the Music Tectonics Conference. It takes place in person October 25th through the 27th, 2022, in the Music Tech Hub of Los Angeles. Top-tier sponsorships are selling fast, but we still have a spot for you, whether your business is a hungry startup or an industry leader already. Every sponsorship level comes with an exhibitor booth at the Loews Santa Monica Beach Hotel on October 26th, the main conference hub for keynotes and panels. Your company will be at this epicenter of music, tech, and innovation throughout the event. That's just one perk of being a sponsor at Music Tectonics. You could be a guest on this podcast or even play a role in conference programming. Interested? Let's talk. Go to musictectonics.com to start the conversation with our contact form. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we are back with this news roundup, and we're thinking about the conference a lot because it's coming up so soon. But this may be the most important piece of news for the music industry. From Variety, Jem Oswald put out this piece. It was obviously reported elsewhere too. Music publishers, streaming services avoid another battle royale by setting royalty rates for the next 4 years. Big news because, well, this affects the overall revenue of every part of the industry, really. It starts off after a grueling, hard-fought, and ultimately victorious legal battle over streaming rates for the years 2018 to 22, the National Music Publishers Association, the Nashville Songwriters Association International, and the Digital Media Association today have announced a settlement with streaming services for certain mechanical streaming rates in the U.S. for the years 2023 to 2027, 15.35%. The announcement comes as a surprise, as the NMPA has been saying for months that it would push for a 20% rate for the forthcoming period. However, sources tell Variety that concessions were made on both sides, likely in the form of modifications that reach beyond the headline rate, such as the way that, quote, bundles, such as discounted streaming subscription rates for family and student plans and per subscriber minimums, are treated. Sources also say that both sides were eager to avoid another protracted, distracting, and brutally expensive legal battle, to put it mildly. The fight over the previous 2018 to 22 rate period went on for more than 3 years and cost many millions of dollars in legal and other fees. There's a little bit more about the details on this too. It gets into the weeds, but I will read a little more. While specifics were not provided, according to the announcement, the new deal includes a number of changes to other components of the rate, including increases of the per subscriber minimums and the, quote, total content costs, TCC calculations, which reflect the rates that services pay to record labels. The agreement also modernizes the treatment of bundles of products or services that include music streaming and updates how services can offer incentives to attract new subscribers. There's a lot in the details as well.
And bundling has been pretty controversial, right? It's like how it's, part of all of the crazy math that goes into those black box royalties from DSPs, and
in this case they're talking about like bundling users, right, where this, you have families and students and so forth. All the things that we think, you think about it as a consumer, where you say, oh, well, this is cool, this is a nice deal or whatever, is actually gets into these negotiations with rights holders because it shifts how much they get paid. And so the DSPs have to sort of include that in these negotiations, which then impacts their ability to market and grow and so forth. But this is great. Publishers won a big victory in July when the Copyright Royalty Board upheld its 2018 decision to raise the rate to 15.1% from the previous 11.4%.
That is so crazy.
From 2018 to 22. This is a continued increase. Some people were surprised that it was only a little bit more than the newest increase.
Right.
But obviously there were some other negotiations behind the scenes that probably affected the bottom line. And I think, the main thing here really is just, it's good for the music industry. I don't know how
getting paid.
Yeah,
yes.
the streaming services have to take a hit on it, but I think it's important for rights holders and ultimately creators to be able to make a living or even do better if they hit it big with a great song.
And honestly, just being able to do this without the protracted legal battle, that this is, hopefully a more collaborative process that will affect, when we have to come back to these questions in, 2027, that hopefully there'll be models for a less adversarial and more collegial way of making these decisions.
And it really does, even though it sounds very like in the weeds conversation, very technical and legal and financial in that sense, it really does to me mark a turning point in a way, because first there was the battle around free downloads, peer-to-peer sharing, then iTunes coming up with a model of paid downloads, and then streaming had to almost have the battle all over again because it's changing the immediate price, in a sense, of music, and it's taken a long time for it to scale. Now that it's scaled, there's no longer an argument of, oh, but it's going to be bigger when you scale. In a sense, it's like, well, it'll continue to grow to some extent, but it's maybe tabling off worldwide. So it's good to set rates at a place that seems more fair to the rights holders. But in addition, what intrigues me about all of it is that this is the new baseline for revenue in the industry.
Right.
And the battles have been fought about digital licensing of music. And now the other news that we like to track is about this added icing layer that's getting thicker and thicker of how music is being monetized through social media like Facebook deals, TikTok deals, and gaming and fitness and health and so forth. Whereas streaming competed with downloads competed with physical, the fitness or the health or the gaming, it doesn't really compete with your music listening. It adds value. It like becomes more soundtrack for.
And ideally there's synergy, right? Ideally these things work together.
Well, we see it. I mean, we see it. If you read any industry stuff from managers or record labels, they want their stuff to pop on TikTok because it affects Spotify and Apple. Like you want, like one is for discovery and growth, and then the other is for monetization and sort of non-background, a little less background listening or something like that. So I think it's a good sign.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're always interested in checking out news stories. Feel free to send us any that you think we should keep an eye on. It's a busy conference season for us right now because October 25th through 27th is the Music Tectonics Conference in Santa Monica. Where do we get tickets for that thing?
I think we should probably go to musictectonics.com.
Yeah, and we still have a couple of exhibitor sponsorships, our MIDiA sponsors.
Yes, we have a couple MIDiA sponsors left. Email me at Shayli@rockpaperscissors.biz.
And we've actually sold out of all of our Supernova sponsorships. We've sold out of all of our Star sponsorships. There's just a couple of meteors left. It's going to be awesome. You're going to want to be there.
Yeah, those exhibitor tables are in the center of the action on the second day of the Music Tectonics Conference. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back with more episodes soon. Listen every week. Subscribe. Rate us highly. We'd love to have you.
Share with your friends.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know you can dig deeper into all our episodes with the show notes at musictectonics.com? While you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference, sign up for our newsletter to get updates, or get the Music Tectonics app for music tech news. Everything we do explores seismic shifts that shake up music and technology the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and find me, Dmitri Vietze, if you can spell it, on LinkedIn. Bye-bye.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.